and give it a few seconds and then hit this.
Here we are. It is week 7. You are with Bob and Emil, the Bob and Emil Show. I'm Bob Harris, senior editor of FootballDiehards.com. He's Emil Cadlick, the publisher and head honcho at said establishment. Emil, how are you doing this fine week?
Doing well. Can't believe Friday's already here.
Friday is upon us, and it was an eventful day. Let's just take a little stock here. ESPN's Field Yates put out a tweet in which he noted, in 10 months on the job as Cleveland's general manager, John Dorsey has now traded away Josh Gordon, Corey Coleman, Jason McCourty, Danny Shelton, Deshaun Kaiser, Sean Coleman, Jamar Taylor, Kevin Hogan, Cody Kessler, and oh yeah, today he made it. He made another one. He added another. It was Carlos Hyde, traded to Jacksonville Jaguars for a 5th-round draft pick, clearing the way for Nick Chubb. Hugh Jackson's been telling us for 2-3 weeks, we're going to get Nick Chubb more carries.
They found a way.
They figured it out. Yeah, get rid of the guy. And look, it's not like Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde had been a reasonably effective fantasy running back. Certainly early on, it slowed down. The per carry average was not great, and Nick Chubb obviously was, because on 3 carries against the Raiders, he destroyed them. 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards. So unusual game there. But look, our friend Matt Waldman from the rookie scouting portfolio coming this season, for all the accolades that Saquon Barkley got, and certainly deserved based on his performances that we've seen so far. Matt Waldman in the rookie scouting portfolio ranked Nick Chubb ahead of Saquon Barkley and basically said he's the best running back in terms of the needed skills overall that he's scouted in a number of years. That's saying something. We know Matt. We know his process. He's pretty busy. So let's look at this from the Cleveland angle first. I mean, for fantasy owners, boy, I mean, what more do you want than Nick Chubb with a clear path to playing time, especially this week going against the Buccaneers?
Well, also, Duke Johnson's going to get a lot of stuff too. But yeah, I mean, just looking at his carries, those 3 for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, he's got 3-2-2, 3-3-3 rushes for the last 6 weeks. And now he gets to play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I assume he'll start or close to it. So a lot of potential there. Obviously, you want to have him if you can get him, or if he's a free agent. He shouldn't be a free agent, but let's say he is.
John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar, from our own site, put out on Twitter on DraftKings, Nick Chubb is $3,600 this week.
Yeah, the DFS Dynamo
has surrendered 28.7 points per game in PPR scoring to opposing running backs. That's 666 yards from scrimmage, 31 receptions and 6 TDs. He becomes an immediate cash game play that you can do a lot of building around if you so desire, and I think a lot of us will so desire. Great play, great talent, comes into a perfect position. So what does this do for Baker Mayfield? Is it a material change for Mayfield in the passing attack, which is down some weapons, right? We've lost, Rashard Higgins, Derek Willis is out. There's been a lot of pressure on Jarvis Landry. He's kind of fallen a little short in terms of, the heavily targeted, but hasn't been as productive as he'd like to be. David Njoku, Antonio Callaway, not as maybe consistent as you'd like. So does Nick Chubb give us somebody that we could hang our hat on and count on production from?
Yeah, no, Nick Chubb, I think he only had 1 target in the last 6 games. Obviously, he hasn't been in that much and gotten that many touches. So I think he's going to help the running game. Those, remembering those 2 touchdowns and those long runs, he's got talent. Maybe he's ready. Maybe that's why they got rid of Hyde. He's not going to probably help in the passing game, but obviously if he can run better than Hyde did and give them some yardage downfield on first down, etc., they're going to be able to go to those other talent. They've got a lot of talent. They've lost the reception capability of Hyde, and just looking at his numbers recently, he didn't do anything the last game in Week 6. Didn't even get a target Hyde didn't even get a target last week. So
it hasn't been that great for him the last couple games, I would say. It just seems like he's kind of fallen off. And look, I think, from the Jaguars' perspective, the latest word is, the expectations are Leonard Fournette isn't going to be back until after the bye, like week 10. He is doing some running today on the side, but you bring in a guy, and you have TJ Yeldon there, who for this week, go ahead and assume we're not going to see a lot of Carlos Hyde, if any Carlos Hyde. And I say that all the local observers are saying he won't play this week. He got the deal today, Friday. He gets to Jacksonville, gets on the active roster. Look, Jamal Charles came in off the street and contributed, as Mike Dempsey, our serious co-host on Football Diehards, who covers Jacksonville on a daily basis, noted. Jamal Charles came in cold without playing for anybody and got plays his first weekend. It's possible Hyde does. I don't think you can play him. I think this is a longer-term play. What do you think it means for Leonard Fournette owners, though? If you've been holding on all this time, is this a big disappointment, or is this just insurance?
Well, it's insurance, but you're a team that's starting to lose games. You're in the conference championship last year, and all of a sudden your most important player on offense is supposed to be a run-dominated year, is still looking weeks out. You've got to do something. The last couple of games were really bad, and I'm sure Hyde's going to help in the short term. But if and when Fournette is ready to go, he's the number one.
Right, and I think the issue here is obvious. Fournette hasn't played a full season since his sophomore season at LSU. Missed 5 games his junior year with an ankle injury. Missed 2 games as a rookie with the Jaguars last year because of ankle and quad injuries. He was also suspended for a game last season. So he'll have missed 8 of 22 possible regular season games since being drafted. That's a pretty good portion. It's hurting fantasy owners. Meanwhile, Hyde missed 11 games in his first 2 seasons with San Francisco. Since then, he's only missed 3 games since the start of the 2016 season. Played 13 games in 2016, every game last year, all 6 this season. Was the Browns' leading rusher. So they have a piece here, right? And basically, to me, it looks like you have a great handcuff. If you already, let's say you own Hyde right now, you have a great handcuff to Fournette, maybe a tradable piece, a little chess piece for you to use on the Fournette owner. And if maybe Fournette's injury is worse than we realize, and maybe this trade foreshadows some news that's coming. What kind of upside do you see Hyde having were he to have a featured role in Jacksonville in a run-first offense, or hopefully a run-first offense?
Well, I think he could do really well the next few weeks, especially he can also catch the ball. They lost Corey Grant, too, who was a really good pass-catching back. And Jamal came in, Jamal is, retired essentially before he came here by a long shot. So Grant really made a difference for them having to do something. I think Hyde can have a couple good games, but once Fournette's back. But when is he coming back? You might as well just ride the wave, and maybe, like you said, get a trade. But he's going to be used. Maybe not this week that much. Maybe so. Maybe they get him in. It's a running position.
Back, that's the position where it can happen if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, if it were a longer term issue for Fournette, I think you have a solid running back too. Problems for Jacksonville, offensive line's pretty beat up, heavily injured, but still, you can see how their plan is going awry, right? Yep. So they came into the season wanting to be a run-heavy team. Injuries and attrition, various reasons have made them more of a throwing team. It puts more pressure on Blake Bortles than he's able to handle on a consistent basis. But also, it puts more pressure on the defense that was supposed to be the strength of the team that we saw in Dallas last week, kind of, struggle with communication.
Well, the offense has to help the defense. They have to have sustained drives. They have to give them rest. They have to keep the balance of the clock, and you can't rely on the defense to do everything for you. They get tired.
And that's a great segue into our next topic, by the way. The Arizona Cardinals fired offensive coordinator Mike McCoy after a dismal 45-10 loss to the Denver Broncos. The offense couldn't do anything, right? It was miserable. As you said, part of this is you have to extend drives. They were horrible in third down conversions. I think they were 0-13.
It was,
at one point. heading in. I think I'm looking for some numbers here. Yeah, it's been bad. I mean, they're at the bottom, like 30th in scoring. They haven't been able to reach 300 yards of offense in a game yet. And this is a team with Larry Johnson. So the complaints were creativity and the lack of use of Johnson, who has 106 carries, 335 yards, 20 passes for 166 yards so far this season. Byron Leftwich, the former Jacksonville quarterback, comes in as the offensive coordinator. Based on what you saw against Denver, with the problems are pretty obvious, Emil. You have issues with the offensive line, and you had issues with the play calling in general. How much can the play calling fix the big problem?
Yeah. Well, you still also have a rookie quarterback who I like, but despite liking somebody, it still takes time, especially if you have a team with weaknesses like the offensive line. Right. Johnson, I'll just whip through his fantasy PPR scores since week 1. 17, 6, 16, 20, 21, 15, and then Denver he got 10. So, you obviously want more from him. You probably picked him in the early first round. I don't know if you're going to get much more. If you're going to be able to get 20 to 15 occasionally with him, I think you're going to be lucky. Can Rosen get better over the next few games? Yeah, but can you really with the whole accumulation of what you just brought up? I don't know, Larry. It's going to be hard to have David Johnson really become an RB1, a strong RB1 like we thought it was going to be.
Right. Just a few other numbers. Their 452 rushing yards to date is their second fewest through 7 games in the Super Bowl era.
Wow.
That's bad. Wow. Johnson in 2016, when he was last healthy under Bruce Arians, 23.6 touches per game, 132 yards of scrimmage per game, 5.7 scrimmage yards per touch. So far this year, 18 touches per game, 71.6 scrimmage yards, 4.0 scrimmage yards per touch. It seems to me, if you're in a situation where you are the Cardinals and you have this talented player in Larry Johnson, a capable receiver who's caught, 80 passes in a season, and you have a young quarterback who's not getting pass protection, let's make some of those handoffs longer handoffs, right? Short passes, get Larry Johnson out in space where he can create mismatches, and if not juke defenders, run them over because they're the little fellas. So
he hasn't gotten a lot of last night three targets, 3 catches. He could do a lot more.
Right, and that's something head coach Steve Wilkes lamented. From week 1 on, every week he talked about we've got to get David Johnson more involved. Maybe now the message has been sent, and Byron Leftwich, the new offensive coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals, will get the job, and pretty highly regarded. Leftwich, by the way, just happened in recent years as an assistant coach, the quarterback's coach there. So interesting. Worked with Carson Palmer, and maybe that helped move him along as well. So interesting situation. They play week 8 against the San Francisco 49ers. Rosen injured his toe. Sounds like he'll be ready to go. We don't know about Ricky Seals-Jones. Looked like a pretty significant forearm injury, or he seemed to be holding it pretty seriously. So
for people who have him as their number 1 tight end, they better start looking because
we
haven't heard yet, and it's already Friday. And just doctors, couch doctors as we are, watching him hold that way he walked off. That's to me, it was concerning, but we need to wait and find out.
I'm with you. After 1,000 years of watching football, because we're very old. I mean, you get, players generally, when they look at something, when I see a player like running off the field, looking at his hand, or just glancing.
So he was carrying it like this.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, like I said, if I see a player just like looking at something, I think, wow, that's probably hurt a lot worse than, I'd be crying like a small girl child.
But they haven't said anything yet about it, so maybe it's not as bad. But
no, so let's move on. The Saints have a very tough matchup this week. Interesting development there is Ted Ginn placed on injured reserve. I believe the day that happened was Thursday on the Football Diehards show on Sirius. Every single question was, should I drop Aaron Jones for Traquan Smith? Should I drop Kenyon Drake for Traquan Smith? Should I drop? And basically the point for me was, got someone on your bench who you're not playing, who can't make your lineup every week, and you want to make a speculative move. I don't care if their name is Kenyon Drake. I don't care what their name is. They're not making your lineup at one position. Maybe Traquan Smith can at a different position, and he gives you a little upside. But are we getting, our tendency to chase the lure, the shiny new thing, to jump after it? I mean, there's a drop of blood in the water, and his name is Traquan Smith, and we're all sharks going after it. Are we getting too far up front of this one, Emil?
Well, obviously, if you're cutting a Drake, who still is getting pretty good points, we'll talk about that later. It's getting split down the middle, but you're getting something from him. So obviously, if you can get him for not much, you should pick him up, and he's probably been picked up in most leagues. 3 targets, 3 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was an incredible, crazy game. But Cameron Meredith had 5 targets, 5 catches, and 70-some-odd yards. You still have, are we really going to expect the speculative thing? Is this rookie who's got a lot of talent, is he really going to come out there and really get you 10 to 15 points that maybe Drake's going to give you 8 to 12?
But that said, let's say you're managing your roster and you have, there's no way Drake's ever going to make your starting lineup. You have
well, then you might as well do it. Oh, sure.
Lindsay,
yeah. Sure.
And maybe he's mired down as,
Yeah, and you're weak at receiver, and yeah, absolutely, you do it in that case. Yeah, if you can get rid of somebody that's not as important, he should be. It's like fishing. You got to have the pole in the water if you're going to catch the new fish. You want to get the fish, the new opportunity guy. He's been waiting. He looked great in preseason. Yeah, he's a guy who you do want to have on your roster when it's time for him to have a chance, and get rid of him if it doesn't work.
How comfortable you feel about this matchup this week? We all saw what the Baltimore Ravens defense did to the Titans. I'm going to suggest that not everyone is as bad offensively as the Titans. We may talk about that in a moment. But how confident are you in Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Drew Brees going into this game?
I don't know. I'm pretty confident in the whole group to do well.
I think we have Brees ranked, QB 12. I think that's kind of indicative of where we're at with the passing attack. I think we have high hopes for the rushing attack. And look, they can get enough done through the air. But those 11 sacks last week have me a little worried.
That is a lot. Well, maybe they'll throw some short passes to Kamara this week.
Right.
Because he had a low of his fantasy value. It was like 7 last or something like that. I'd written down. He only had 7 PPR points, which is, we were worried about Ingram coming back, and it was a crazy game, but that's pretty low. That's a big concern for fantasy owners of Kamara.
Yeah, the 11 sacks, and I think we've seen Brees has not been pressured too heavily. It happens on occasion, but I guess the hope is we can get Kamara a little more involved. How worried are you if you're a Kamara owner about the usage of Mark Ingram? Do you think this is something they've talked about wanting to level it out? Do you think that happens?
It did last year, even with Kamara being a rookie. It's just frustrating to see the 2 goal line carries last Monday night to go to Ingram. Maybe they want to keep him healthy. That's something we don't think about a lot as fantasy owners, is they're trying to keep these guys healthy. The game script may change, because obviously Kamara is a great pass-catching player. I'm sure it'll level out, but it's a definite concern how well Kamara and how many fantasy points Kamara's put up before last Monday night's game was fantastic. It's going to level out, but it's going to be frustrating, I think.
And speaking of frustrating, we talked about the Tennessee Titans, who have not found the end zone for 2 weeks. They've only scored 87 points all year. They rank last in the NFL in offensive touchdowns, 30th in points per game, 30th in total yards, 28th in yards per rush at 3.7, and 29th in passer rating. They have a new offensive coordinator, Matt LaFleur. When you watch them, what do you see as the problem? We thought they'd have a pretty high-powered offensive line. Clearly, they weren't able to protect Marcus Mariota. Is this something where they need a seismic shift in scheme here? Maybe something along the lines of what we saw last year, a run-heavier approach and maybe more play action, or is this just the normal for this season? Wow,
it's hard to tell whether that's going to be a normal. That would be really sad. Nothing was working in that last game. It was really sad, and there's really almost no relevant fantasy player right now. Corey Davis had that huge game where he scored 31 fantasy points, and the next
We're all
week,
still playing him for that game.
yeah,
I mean,
and he had 8 the next week and 3 PPR that really horrible game against Baltimore.
yeah, I think the best advice that we should give, and that we give all the time on Football Diehards on the radio and in all our magazines, is divorce the name from the numbers. And I think that's harder to do. So we go through the first month, maybe 6 weeks of the season, and you're still kind of playing the name. Certainly the first month.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're giving them a shot.
Time. Yeah, you invested time, research. I think as we hit week 7, you need to be playing the numbers. Philip Lindsay says to play the numbers.
Yep.
I mean, there are guys that emerge and come out of nowhere, and let's talk about some of them right now. I mean, Dalvin Cook, the decision's been made for us this week. Yeah. He has ruled out a series of bizarre events on Thursday, and before he was ruled out today, go back to the main page of the site, check the breaking news, headline news section, and you'll get the whole story. But the bottom line is Latavius Murray starting again and ran really well against the Cardinals last week. Mike Zimmer said today he needs a lot of carries to get the job done. Those carries didn't preclude the passing attack from being effective. Is this maybe one of the fantasy-friendliest offenses in the NFL right now?
Yeah, I think so. And, Lat Murray had a bad game a couple of weeks ago where everybody thought he was going to do well when we knew Cook was out, and he had a horrible game. But, I think that the team has gotten better and recovered, and obviously I think he's going to be a very valuable player for Minnesota and for fantasy players. And, of course, the things with Thielen and Diggs is still doing well, too. It's definitely a fantasy-friendly.
Putting up numbers in a remarkable rate. All this is it turns out that maybe the Kirk Cousins money was money well spent, or at least so far he's been fueling this offense. Adam Thielen, as we said, at a historic pace, 600-yard games, and on pace for I think record catches. I think he'll go past Marvin Harrison's. I think he's on pace for 155. I think so. Look, it's a pretty impressive run for them right now, and I think Murray going up against the Jets this weekend is a pretty good play as well. The Jets secondary is decimated, so play everybody, play the Vikings. Another interesting situation, one that's coming up in the Monday night game that's going to be difficult to figure out, one that's going to puzzle fantasy owners. Ito Smith and Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman being the starter. Devontae Freeman is placed on IR. I suppose there's a possibility he can come back, but it's like a minimum of 8 weeks. But he's only played 2 games. We have a pretty good idea of how these guys are getting used, right?
Yep. Well, last game, Smith had 11 carries but only 22 yards. Coleman had 10 carries for 35 yards. But Ito's getting touchdowns. He's getting the ball a little bit more down at the goal line. They both didn't get many targets. They both got 2 targets in the game against Tampa Bay, which kind of surprised me. But there's so many targets there in Atlanta that they're not getting the targets. At least Coleman isn't getting the targets. But Ito's the guy, it's hard to find quality running backs, and some of these leagues are more touchdown-oriented. Ito's definitely a guy you want to get on your roster if you can, and see if he gets up a little more. Just looking at Ito's PPR numbers, 0 for weeks 1 through 6, 0, 6, 6, 13, 8, 10 the last 3 weeks. That's a usable, flex player. And if he can just get a little bit more, and we know he's going to get the chance with Freeman on IR, he may be a valuable player.
Yeah, he seems to this point that he's gotten the more fortuitous carries, right?
Yes.
From good spots. And that doesn't preclude Coleman from scoring anywhere on the field. We've seen him do that, and it's a capable receiver as well. But it is interesting to see. It was pretty common procedure to play both Freeman and Coleman, not saying on the same roster, but for people to be playing them, one is a flex, one is an RB2 or whatever. Yeah. I don't think that's really changed. I don't think we really see a change there. We just changed the names, and the new name is Ito Smith and not Devonta Freeman. And it hasn't been Freeman. By the way, in that game, it sounds like Giorgio Telvecchio is going to do the kicking. Matt Bryant will be out. That's the Monday night game. And also Mohamed Sanu and Calvin Ridley will be guys to watch. They've got to get on the practice field. We'll have more on that on the site leading up to the game. One more running back situation we touched on already. Let's dig in a little deeper. Frank Gore and and Kenyon Drake. I'm having a hard time letting go of Drake, of divorcing the numbers from his name, but the numbers have not been good.
No, the last game he had 11.7 fantasy points, which it's close. What's saving Drake is he's catching the ball. They're giving him some catches. Let's see if I've got it right here in front of me. 6 targets last game, 4 catches, 21 yards. They're splitting. Gore's getting a few more carries, but he's getting a lot more yardage out of them. Of course, Drake fumbled at the goal line in that overtime game. It's 11.7. Good for you. You're frustrated because you're not getting what you wanted to get, but he still may be useful if you need a flex position. But I don't see it changing. It doesn't look like it's going to change. And he can't. Go ahead.
I guess the thing that I'm hanging my hope on it in the leagues where I drafted him, and a lot of them are best ball. I don't know that I have him a lot in regular season long, but it wasn't until late last year, the second half of the season last year, that he emerged as a playmaking threat. And I'm hoping that maybe at some point Adam Gase realizes that value. I mean, when you see Frank Gore run for 100 yards, and our friend Marcus Grant from NFL Network kind of says, Frank Gore is basically a cockroach. He will be alive and gaining yardage long after the rest of us are gone.
But that in that overtime game, Gore really made a difference.
Yeah,
he kept that team together in the end and ran really well and hard. And he doesn't fumble. And so you succeeded with that guy. He ran it 15 times and Drake ran it 13, so it's not that much different. But the effectiveness of the running, Gore had 6.7 average, and Drake only had 4.4. And again, I said Drake's getting more targets in the passing game, but that cockroach ain't going away.
And capable of the big plays as well. But Gore is, man, he is just rocking it. And we go against the Detroit Lions this week in South Florida, where the temperatures might be hot. Maybe the defense can get worn down if you can grind on them. They're giving up, I think, 5.7 a carry, the Detroit defense, not a good run defense. So I'm kind of interested to see what Gore can do in that one. And I guess, let's close this out with a little bit of a look at Baltimore. We talked about the Saints. The passing attack, I think this one's set up for some success. I think that guys like John Brown and Willie Snead in a revenge game, I wrote about it in this week's DFS 3 and Out. You should go check that out. But this defense has not been great. This is not the same defense we saw last year. Saints defense, Marshawn Lattimore was pretty much impenetrable. He's had some ups and downs this year. But, boy, do you like the Ravens' passing attack this week?
Yeah, I think you're right. They've really it's changed. I don't know why it changed, but they're really playing well. John Brown, despite his small size, his abilities, he's getting open downfield. And when you can get at least one guy to push that defense back and open up other things, it's really helping out. So I don't think it's good. I think they're going to continue to do well. The passing game is going to do very well for Baltimore.
Saints currently the third worst pass defense in the league. I like Willie Snead this week. He's second on the team receptions, but you said it, John Brown has been killing it. Last week it was Michael Crabtree, who's battled some drops, but they're still going to him. I thought it was interesting.
He came back well. He came back really well last year.
He really did, and they gave him the opportunity. CBS pointed out New Orleans has allowed a handful of what they call DFS tournament-winning stat lines. Calvin Ridley had the 3 touchdown games. Mike Evans had a 147-yard 1 touchdown game. Deshaun Jackson had a 150-yard 2 touchdown game. Sterling Shepard, a 77-yard 1 touchdown game. So there's some hay to be made here. I like that play an awful lot. Just like I like, I don't want to get into my whole column here, but Kiki QT, are we all chasing the Cole Beasley points from last week? And I think maybe we are, but maybe with good reason. They are not defending the slot man effectively. And this week, unlike last week, when they could move some pieces around to try and stop Beasley because there are no other weapons in that receiving game, we've got DeAndre Hopkins. We've got Will Fuller. That's going to require Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Boye to focus on those guys and leave Kiki Kuti in the middle of the field. He hasn't got the time. Well, he had that first week. He had 15 targets.
It was an insane amount of targets. Yeah.
Right, caught 11 of them. we could see another heavily targeted game. Are you interested in him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's really messed with Fuller, and Fuller was one of my big sleepers, and I've just soaked up Fuller's points for weeks. And QT shows up, and he really has messed with that. And I think he's going to continue to mess with that because, like you said, it's a great option for that slot to get those targets and move get those smaller catches. And PPR wise, he could be a dynamo this week.
Yep, I agree. And all right, so we're going to wrap this up tonight, the Bob and Emil Show. I would like to remind everyone to hit the main page, hit our site. You'll find things like my DFS 3 Now column, all our podcasts, Jen Ryan's season-long and DFS Vegas Excel cheat sheet, an invaluable tool, something I have open on my desktop all week long. We've got JJ Buck, John Lobb, Armando Marsal, Bobby Gomes doing all his DFS stuff, Brad Cruz with his start sits, David Hunter with his Hunter reports, Evan Tarciano with the crystal ball, and tons of tools, all crafted by the very one and only Emil Kadlik, including our DFS lineup optimizers, get all our target data, red zone rushing stats, snap counts, fantasy points allowed, all these things, player performance by opponent, all waiting for you. We'll have pregame shows, videos with Bobby Gomes and Armando Marsal in the hour leading up to kickoff each week, and that's Thursday night and Sunday morning. You can catch me every day on the Football Diehards on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, 6 to 8 Eastern. You can catch me Sunday morning on the pregame show with Jeff Manns from 11 to 1 p.m. Eastern. And you can catch Mike Dempsey and myself, the new Football Diehards, on NFL Radio every Saturday night from 8 to 11 Eastern. And get busy. We'll be back on the site. I'll have the video updates, injury update up early, midday Saturday to kind of get you up to speed to everything you need to know. So tune in. Emil, any last words?
No. By the way, for Oakland with Lynch out, you think it's a Jalen Richards is the guy that's viable?
Jalen Richard. I think everyone. Talk to our old friend Adam Kaplan tonight. He was up on this story. He thinks that Doug Martin is a guy that's really impressed them. The former Buccaneers running back, maybe a plug-and-play option, but Richard's going to have some value. I think, kind of what he is now, maybe a little more. Maybe they need to rely a little more on the passing attack. So I do think both those guys, that Doug Martin's available in your league, grab them. There was some reporting that maybe IR was a possibility for Lynch, but Adam kind of shoots that down. He thinks it's going to be a month-long absence, and then he'll be back. So we'll see. A lot of talk. John Gruden saying they're not tanking in Oakland. You'll have an article. I'll have an article up on that on the website tonight. But interesting stuff there. So yeah, I do think that Doug Martin is a guy that especially if you're a Lynch owner right now, be out hitting that waiver wire. And
cool.
If you're looking to play a little speculatively, go ahead and grab Jalen Richard, especially in PPR leagues. So there we have it. We'll catch you next week on the Bob and Emil Show. Thanks for tuning in.
Talk to you next week.